it started at midnight last night. It's been going on all day. Stop Common Core has lit up Twitter because of you, because of the people that are seeing the messaging of the ills of Common Core. We're focused tonight on Alabama. Alabama wants to kick Common Core to the curb. You just heard from Representative Barry Moore, who has sponsored a bill to get rid of Common Core. But you know what? It's been done before. Oklahoma, the great state of Oklahoma, I have visited that state. I have had offices in that state. I have worked in that state. It's a good state, folks. Good people there. By the way, when Obama ran the second time, he did not win a single precinct in that state. It's kind of red. Okay, so Oklahoma was one of the leaders that realized, hey, we don't need Common Core. Let's get rid of it. And it was then Representative Dan Fisher, who was on the front lines of battle at a time when this had never been done. And guess what? He's right here. See? Right there. And today, Dan Fisher is serving in many other capacities. But Dan, let's go back to the time when the initiative was taken to kick Common Core out. Nobody had done it. Weren't you scared?
No, I was afraid we wouldn't do it. That was my greatest fear.
So what was the process? I mean, how do you just at the time that all this good stuff was being done for your schools and all this money was gushing in, how could you convince the people of Oklahoma to say no to all that candy?
Well, Mark, first of all, even though Oklahoma votes very red when it comes to the presidential elections, we have some of the same struggles that other states have, because when we get into our internal statewide politics, you have the same kind of progressives and moderates and, fighting back and forth. So it's not like we don't have our fights. Sometimes I think the way we vote in presidential elections might be a little bit misleading to the country. I am proud of the way that our people do vote when it comes to national elections. But I said all that to say this. We had a formidable enemy here in the state, primarily the teachers union, State Chamber of Commerce, these large money-backed, union-backed groups that were convinced that Common Core is the greatest thing that happened since the alphabet. And so they were really up against us. The common people, quite frankly, didn't know that much about Common Core. Like you said a while ago, we were early on in the fight. I don't know if that makes us any more special, but we tackled this thing early on. But we had some tremendous struggles, and we had to bring the people up to speed. Thankfully, because of the conservative nature of our population here in Oklahoma, we have some pretty strong and rather large activist groups that stay on top of things. And quite frankly, they help to educate those of us who are in the legislature, because you got stuff coming at you 1,000 miles an hour from practically every direction. And it's very, very difficult to stay up on all of this. And of course, as you well know, the feds are constantly inventing some new way to educate. If it's not No Child Left Behind, it's Race to the Top, and it's constantly something. So it's very, very difficult, number one, if you're in the trenches fighting, to keep up with this, but secondly, to know the newest fangle-dangle deal that they're doing. And of course, they're always well-funded, and we may get into that a little bit, but Bill Gates and his foundation, he and his wife, Bill and Melinda are probably the two that are the most responsible for Common Core being a problem in this country. And now, of course, you're fighting in Alabama, and he's spent well over $200 million promoting this thing around the country. And
let's
I'm sure
think about
that
that.
number's old. Yeah, let's do it.
I know when you got the kind of money he does, I mean, it's possible to give large amounts of money to a lot of different causes, but why would anybody Bill Gates or anybody else, feel that it's that important? I mean, are they? Is there an agenda?
Yes, there is.
You didn't hesitate.
Well, no, not at all. I'm not a conspiracy theorist generally.
I'm not either.
I don't get wound up in who was on the grassy knoll shooting at JFK and all this, this Bigfoot reel and maybe there were other shooters at Dealey Plaza in Dallas, and maybe there is some type of a Sasquatch animal running around in the hills of Virginia or Western Virginia. I don't know, but I can tell you there is clearly a conspiracy to undermine not only our national heritage, but the way we educate our kids. And to be honest with you, Mark, that's nothing new. It's been going on for decades now. And one of my big objections to Common Core or No Child Left Behind or any of these other myriad programs that the leftists have pushed upon us is that it's not the federal government's job to be telling us how to educate our children to begin with.
Amen.
But see, here's the thing: these global or globalist billionaires, these elites that have more pocket change than you and I will probably ever make in a lifetime, they have the money and the wherewithal to promote their pet projects. You and I have strong philosophical beliefs about a good number of things. The difference in you and I and Bill and Melinda Gates is I have a few $100s that I can throw at it, and they have a few $100 million that they can throw at it. But they're committed, Mark. They're committed to a globalist agenda. And for years, I believe, there has been this strategy, and it's changed faces, and they learn and morph as time goes along. But this idea to create a force of human worker bees, to be able to manage the population, to make sure that they have people to do all of the jobs that they, meaning these globalist elitists, believe need to be done. And Common Core is just another one of those steps in that direction.
That's an interesting thought. It's not the first time I've heard it, but I have said before all of this came up, it dawned on me that the university education, let me kind of toss this out at you.
Sure.
Higher education, to get a BS degree or to get a degree in college, whatever you pursue, is a certification that makes it more likely that you're going to get a good job with a good company, with a good retirement and good benefit, the American dream.
Sure.
It's what I call the 20-40-20. You go to school for 20 years, then you work for 40, and then you retire for 20, and
right.
Obviously death can intervene in that and mess it up. Anyway,
sure.
But it dawned on me is, why is it, if these big companies want to educate and train, well, why don't they pay for it? Let them offer scholarships and recruit the best people and let them send them to college. Why is it my burden as a taxpayer to support all these universities and all that they do, to subsidize the cost of training for these corporations?
Well, they might have to sell a jet or a yacht if you didn't pay for it. I mean, quite simply, they would much rather do their work on your dollar than they would their own.
Yeah, I studied sociology and poli-sci at the People's Republic of Florida State. And what we're referring here is called instrumentalist theory, that the government is an instrument of a class-conscious group, and they use the government to advance their own interests. Begin. You with us, Dan?
And Mark, sorry about that. It just dropped and went dead.
I heard it, but we're here. We got it. We're good to go. So basically, instrumentalist theory purports that the state, meaning the federal government, any government, is an instrument of this class-conscious class of elites, and they get the government to do their bidding at the expense of all of us. So that's not out of the question. That's a plausible scenario.
No, I think you're right, and they've chosen public school to be their battleground. because they have finagled things around to where they control it. And see, that's really the fundamental issue here. Whether or not Common Core is good or bad or somewhere in the middle, the real question is the fundamental question of who is going to control how our children are educated and by what standards they are educated. Mm-hmm. I mean, that really is ultimately the bottom line. And I personally believe that the people of Alabama know better about what their kids in Alabama need than Washington, D.C. does. And we here in Oklahoma know better about how to educate our kids, and we have the vested interest. They're our kids.
So how did it turn out? I mean, you kicked Common Core out how long ago?
That would have been 3 years ago.
3 years ago. So your school systems, I presume, have just collapsed without all the assistance of this great program.
Oh, sure. They're all empty and just birds flying in and out of them, and buses are all parked everywhere, wheels are flat, all that. No, obviously it didn't affect anything other than we started ridding ourselves of the whole Common Core format and framework. But I'll tell you that fight is not over, and I would warn the citizens of Alabama, even if you are able to officially outlaw, just use that terminology, okay, Common Core from your state, they will find ways to try to backdoor it. And, one of the things that I let out in a fight after we outlawed Common Core and really pretty much got the top of my head taken off was when the College Board rolled out their new AP frameworks. And of course, AP stands for Advanced Placement. These courses that kids can take in high school where they're supposed to get college credit, and they're advanced courses. And they rolled out a couple of years ago their new AP U.S. History framework. And Mark, I got to tell you, it was so left-leaning. They had just gutted American history of anything that is exceptional, and it was obviously a progressive agenda. So we immediately started to fight that, and it was Oklahoma and Georgia that actually were able to make enough noise that the College Board admitted that there were problems with their framework. But, Mark, they just do window dressing, and they'll just kind of change some wording around a little bit and go right back at it. And as you know, your listeners may or may not know, the College Board is not even a government organization. It's a private corporation, but they control what all of our students across the country study and learn in any advanced placement courses. It's simply ridiculous how we've allowed the control of our education to fall into the hands of these elites. It's unbelievable.
Well, no, I think it's very believable, Dan. I'll tell you why. Is because education can be used as a conduit of indoctrination.
Of course,
and it is the Holy Grail prize of both sides. Okay.
Yeah.
And so, I get it. And I think that's a very cogent point that you bring out is, you can legislate this thing away, but the people that are supporting it, there to begin with, they're not just going to say, "Oh, lost that."
No, they're not.
We have to be vigilant,
Well, and I'm a pretty big supporter of Mike Huckabee. I agree with a lot of the things that he says.
He's a good
man. But he was even guilty. Yeah, he is. But even in the early days of this fight, he was, at least for a while. Now he changed his position to his defense, but for a while he was saying they just needed to rename and repackage Common Core and send it back to the states. Mm-hmm. And I think until he finally figured out what Common Core really was. Mm-hmm. That's the problem, Mark. They have the money, they have the wherewithal, they have the time. They'll just repackage these things, and that's why we constantly are battling the next new leftist progressive educational strategy, because they just go back to the drawing board. It's the same old. And here's the real problem, and I hope your listeners can get this. Already, some of the college entrance exams and assessments like the SAT and the ACT, those are already now written to conform to Common Core standards. So even if a school or a state or a county or whoever was able to rid themselves of Common Core, their kids are still going to encounter it in the assessment tests and the college entrance exams, and then they're going to see it in college. It's just the way it is. And it's so regrettable. And what I meant a while ago when I said this is almost unbelievable, I certainly believe what the leftists are doing. What is difficult for me to understand is why we have stood by all of these decades, and it's been decades now, and watched this happen, and we've done little about it. Thankfully, maybe we're starting to wake up a little bit. You know, I remember when I was a kid, I'm 57. When I first went to school, we had what was called new math, and my dad was an accountant, and so he was an arithmetic guy, and he would get so frustrated in trying to help me in studying the commutative property and the associative property and all this kind of stuff, and they had us doing long division in a much longer fashion. Now, as it turns out, I had a knack for math and finally got a degree in math and taught math in school for about 3 years. But they were doing the new math that, you know, that has become fuzzy math and Common Core even back when I was in elementary school. So there's been this push for a long time. But now you have, as you mentioned earlier, people like Bill Gates who have stepped up, and they are pouring millions and millions of dollars. So my point would be, folks have to not think if they're able to succeed in this effort to, quote, outlaw Common Core, that the battle is over, because it's a war, and that's just one battle. There are many battles, and they will have to be incredibly vigilant, because more than likely the Alabama State Department of Education will start trying to find ways to put Common Core in under some other name or guise, so that they're technically not breaking the law, but they're still pushing the same agenda.
They'll circumvent it. Yeah,
they will.
Yeah,
they will.
It's a cat and mouse game that
It
gets
is.
played out in everyday life, not only on that issue but many others. But hey, you've really woken me up on the concept of vigilance, because, you know, as a football coach, you know, we have an end game, we have a goal.
Yes.
Well, and if the goal is that, but this is an intermediate goal. This goal. We got to get to that one first, and we got to get a first down before we get a touchdown, and we got to win this game before we can win the season, and it's an ongoing struggle. So vigilance is called for, and Dan, thank you for the wake up call, because
you're welcome.
We don't want to get inebriated in a celebration and wake up with a hangover.
No, that's exactly right. Hey, if I could say a couple of things before we're through here.
Sure.
There is an article that was written in 2014. It's a Washington Post article, of all places, and it's entitled "How Bill Gates Pulled Off the Swift Common Core Revolution." Your listeners can go out on the web and read that article. It's probably one of the better written articles on how Common Core came to be and the main players in it, and then it will actually link them to other articles. And then the only other thing that I would want to say is that Common Core also, other than just being an educational framework that is ridiculous, just to be honest with you, the math is just totally ridiculous. Kids get so frustrated because they have to do so many steps, and it's just ridiculous. There's also data collection wired into the program, so that they are collecting a great deal more data on students. And that's another part of this globalist initiative, to be able to have so much data on individuals that it's just kind of the click of a button, they can pull up who you are, everything about you, what your aptitudes are. And that's a scary thing, Mark. And so that's another hidden part of Common Core that a lot of people sometimes don't hear about, is the data collection that is also wired into the system.
And that is a scary thought. And they're going to say, oh, it's just metadata, nothing, blah, blah, blah. And
Sure,
they're going to say, well, and I think we've all seen how inept the government in particular, but all organizations for that
Oh, my
matter, are
gosh.
keeping their servers secured. So,
Or keeping people from leaking things and using it for political purposes.
yeah.
I mean, people are being blackmailed now with information that's supposed to be confidential. I mean, I know you know that, but and so this data collection, though we may have at one time kind of poo-pooed that and said, "Oh, well, you know, they've got all kinds of information." Well, unfortunately, now they've collected enough information that they're able to use sensitive pieces of that information to put
As
in
leverage.
inordinate amounts of pressure on you. That's exactly right.
Well, you know, and let me just, I'm going to comment on your comment. That, you know, you're frustrated that how did we get here? It took decades. Well, the boiling frog came to mind.
Yes, that's right.
So, and they were patient. And folks, if they were patient to get this done, we're going to have to be patient to get it undone. The other thing is on the data mining, metadata, and they're gonna say that this is, you know, innocuous and don't worry about it. And I have this theory that I call a dot. A dot is a piece of information that in and by itself is insignificant and meaningless. As a manager, when I observe certain things about people in their work habits and in their activities, you know, I say, well, that by itself doesn't mean they're not a good employee. But then you get another dot, and another, and another, and another. And a picture begins to emerge, and a picture starts getting into focus.
Sure.
So this metadata, which you can say, well, yeah, it's innocuous. Well, you know, the concentric circles start getting tighter and tighter and tighter.
Exactly right.
Until after a while.
Pixels in a TV.
Exactly. And folks, it's not something that's, I don't see any benefit. I see plenty of potential harm. So if I think we need to be very cautious about metadata.
I agree.
If the data we need to be interested in is, let's see, there were 100 questions, you got 96 right. You get an A.
well, but we can't do that anymore, Mark, because that might hurt the self-esteem of the student that didn't do their homework. So
yes, and it's you know, and then they'll blame the parents for, you know, wrecking the child,
exactly
and
right.
you know, and then they're going to have to start taking. I know this sounds stupid, and it is, but it's happened.
Yes, it has.
The Nazi Germans literally had they owned those children.
Yes, they did.
The children were
really
wards of the state. And
you know,
would they have won the war, things would be very, very different today.
Oh, they would. And that's really pretty much the goal of these globalists. I'm not going to call them Nazis, but they still want the same kind of control. And I'll just close with this thought. Here in Oklahoma, we've decided that the federal government has been in charge of education now for decades, and all they've done is mess it up. And our collective scores in about every category have done nothing but plummet. And we figure it's time for new management. And so we believe it's time for Oklahoma to take charge. In fact, I'm even more specific than that. I believe all the money should go to the local districts, and the districts decide through their school boards how their kids are going to be educated. And then that way they answer directly to the parents, not to some even state department where you really still can't get your hands around those people. So I'm for local control at the most local level and stop this business, because these feds have been messing it up for years, and all they're going to do is continue to do so.
Amen. Oh, you've been. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us. I know we went a little long, but you're kind of our last caller, and so we don't have another caller in the queue. You have been very generous with your time, and you've challenged me. You've challenged us, and thank you for what you've done, providing the leadership, and giving us an example of what can be done.
Thank you.
And continue your work. You're out of the legislature now, but tell us just briefly. We got to go soon. What are you doing now? You're still carrying the torch, right? Still doing the fight.
Oh, sure. Still very, very politically engaged. I just decided I could fight the fight better in other ways. I'm a full-time pastor, and I travel the country doing a a live multimedia presentation in period costume of the pastors of the 18th century that led out in our fight of independence. The British called them the Black Regiment. And I'm at the Capitol, and we're fighting. We're not going to stop. We just sometimes have to fight from a different place on the battlefield. But, the old saying that the price of liberty is eternal vigilance is what we conservatives have to live out. And we can't just sigh and say, wow, we got Donald Trump elected, whether you like him or not. Now we can go back to doing whatever we were going to do. We can't do that. We've got to stay in the fight.
There's so much more. Okay, well, we got to go this time, but
thank you, Mark.
Thank you so much, Dan, and hopefully we'll get a chance to share again, because there's so much more we need to talk about. But thank you for your time.
Look forward to it, and God bless Alabama.